So, what is really exciting and what drew you here today is Debbie Ziegler. She is the mother of Brittany Maynard. Before you got the notice about this meeting, how many of you have heard of Brittany Maynard? Yes. We have her to thank for our new law in California, the End of Life Option Act. We've talked about it here before. If you don't know what it is, of course, the law that permits physicians to provide aid in dying, self-administered aid in dying, for terminally ill, mentally competent California residents. And I think Debbie will probably talk about how Brittany came to change our law in California, even though she'd been gone before our law even changed. But she was a 29-year-old young woman with a lethal brain tumor who went to Oregon. So that much I think you know, and if you don't know, Debbie Ziegler will tell you. Brittany's pictures are up all over here. Thank you, Debbie, for bringing them. If you go to YouTube and you want to see her, she very wonderfully recorded a lot about why she chose to end her life in Oregon, and what her condition was, and how strongly she feels about the right to die, which is, of course, our mission here. And from those videotapes that she made, the legislators in the General Assembly heard from her posthumously about why it's so important that we change the law here in California. So for that, we are extremely grateful. And to her mother, as I read the book that she will have here today, A Wild and Precious Life, and as a mother and as a daughter, it was very hard to not be emotional about it. So it's very courageous of Debbie to come and speak about how her daughter died and the whole thing that led up to it. And the book is quite astonishing. Brittany was quite an unusual young woman. Said some things that we could all learn from, about how she talks to her, how she talked to her doctor, how she talked to her mother, how she talked to her stepfather, about her intentions, and how she was able to cut through the denial that, of course, they had, who would want to see their daughter die, and turn it into acceptance. So I highly recommend this book. Debbie will sign them afterwards. We have a few here, and if we run out, we will mail them to you. And so without further ado, I am very happy and honored to present Debbie Ziegler.
First of all, I'd like to thank the Hemlock Society for having me. I feel like there are people in this room that are the backbone of this movement and who began to open their minds to a new way of thinking about the end of life long before I ever thought of it, and long before my child was aware of death and what it meant. And so I'm very honored to be among your presence, and I feel much the same when I'm in Oregon, where there's a group of people who are they're like the incubator state for this right to die, and who feel strongly about it and who are so knowledgeable about it. And with that, I give you the caveat that I am speaking as a mother. I'm not a politician, I'm not a doctor. I'm speaking to you from my heart as a mother, and I learned a lot on my journey with my daughter that I think is valuable to the general population. And so I won't be giving you a lot of facts and figures, but I will be giving you some things about looking death in the eye. And how difficult that is, and so I will be speaking about that a little bit. This is my daughter. She ended up on the cover of People magazine, and she ended up being a little bit stereotyped. Her story was turned a little bit into a fairy tale about death. And I think most of us in this room know that life and death are not a fairy tale. So I want to begin speaking about life, because my daughter was very alive. She was very vivaciously engaged with the world. She was a very opinionated young lady. She was a willful child. One of my favorite pictures is of her peeking from behind the tree there. And I think you can see in her face then that she's going to do things her way. And she was a very logical child. I had a guest come over. I was a single mother. I had a guest come over, and Brittany was running around, and he said to her, "Stop acting so childishly." And a few seconds later, she came back and tugged my arm, and she said, "Mama, I am a child." And I burst out laughing, because how can you argue with that logic? And how should you behave when you're a child except childishly? And this was the beginning of my beginning to comprehend at the age of 3 and 4 that Brittany was already thinking in very logical ways, and she was playing with her toys very purposefully. And this was who she was going to be her whole life. A very purposeful, a delightful, strong-willed young woman. I believe that the most important thing for the audience here to grasp about dying is that really when we talk about death, we have to define life. And it's just part of a cycle. And I believe that if we define what life is, and that's how we begin our conversation, do you think that being on a machine and being unable to speak and making a little line go up and down, is that your definition of life? Everyone's definition is different. There was a man who was at the assisted care with my father, and he said, "As long as I can watch football and eat ice cream, I'm okay." And that might seem like a simple definition of life, but if you deconstruct it a little bit, it's not. He can see the football. He can comprehend what they're doing. He can root for his team. And he didn't say, "To feed me ice cream." He said, "As long as I can eat ice cream." So he had some idea of what his definition of life was. And so I just wanted to encourage you that for me, the beginning place in this entire conversation is not to just jump in and start talking about the end. It's to start talking about the beginning and the middle. And the end will follow quite naturally, because I think we die much as we live. And so my daughter was a bold, clear-thinking young girl, and she died a bold, clear-thinking young girl. She had a very clear definition of what she felt what the definition of life was. And she did not think that everyone else should share that definition. She never, ever tried to talk other people into, or other cancer patients, because she, of course, met many people. She never, ever tried to talk them into doing what she was doing. She just said, "Don't try to talk me out of it. It is my life, and it is my decision, and it is my death." And she was very autonomous. And in the United States, we've been given a right to be autonomous in our medical care since the 1970s. There was a law case that gave us patient autonomy. Now, to exercise that autonomy is what Brittany and I found was difficult. And you have to be quite strong-willed. And you have to be very clear. And you have to be willing to look at your own condition. And you have to be willing to hear hard things. But my daughter would look those doctors in the eyes, and she would call them on it. If they weren't looking her in the eye, she would say, "Could you please give me some eye contact? I believe I'm dying of a brain tumor. Could I at least have some eye contact?" And she would get their eye contact, and she would ask them difficult questions. And when they tried to hedge, or if she had read a study from their own hospital that disagreed with what they were saying, she would say, "Well, I read a study that was just released in January of this year that says quite the opposite of what you're saying, sir. And it was done here at your own hospital." And so she was well read. She became an expert on her own disease. I know that sounds wonderful and it sounds bright, but what was really and truly odd about it was that she was able to do it without going through what the rest of her family went through, which was denial. She jumped into this coherent way of handling her diagnoses very soon, and the rest of us were left in a dust of denial. And my husband and I were scrambling for what we thought was a miracle cure that might be in another country. And it took us months to understand. And my daughter said to me one night in the hospital, "Mom, I'm done. You get that, don't you?" That's a shameful thing to have to say to your mom. Because I certainly hadn't been acting like I got it. "Mama, I'm dying. You get that, don't you? I really need you to get it, Mama." So my biggest advice when I speak is that we may run into someone who's terminally ill in our lifetime. And I would advise you to listen to them. And I would advise you to try very, very hard to realize what denial feels like. Because it's a strong pull. It sucks you back in so fast. One day, I said to my husband, "I need you to stop. I need you to look me in the eye." He hates when I tell this because it's an emotional moment for us. And he was just calling, he was speaking to doctors all over the world. And I said, "Stop." And I hold my hands and look me in the eye. And he looked at me and I said, "We have to tell Brittany that we know she's dying. We have to say this to her. And we have to say that we hope on hope that we'll still keep looking, but that we understand, based on all the information we have right now, that she's dying. And that we are going to put a safety plan in place, that we are going to do what she's asking us to do." And that was a turning point for us. It was a tipping point. You can almost feel your guts and your heart and your soul like being pulled out of you and then shoved back in. But that tipping point is a really important place to get to. Because it's not acceptance, it's not giving up. It's allowing the truth to have a place in your heart, in your mind. And it was much easier for Brittany when we said, we get it. And you know what, babe? We're going to Portland next week. We got on a plane. Now, why do we have to go to Portland? Because California had no law, no legal way for someone with a gigantic brain tumor to address her end. There was nothing here then. only Portland and Washington and Vermont. And we had a plan, and you know, people who are dying usually have a plan. They have a plan, and everyone's plan is different. Some people, their plan is, I'm going to pretend I'm not sick, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to deal with it all the way to the end. And other people, they say, I'm going to do every single trick that doctor can pull out of a bag. I'm going to do it all. We are free in this country to advocate for our plan. And we need to speak up and do it. And my daughter was a good example of that. Direct eye contact. Don't pull any BS on me. I read your study from your very own hospital. And she said to one doctor, have you ever gone to the end after you do the craniotomy? I mean, you've cut open my head. You've pulled out some of my brain. Are you going to be there in the end? And he was uncomfortable because, of course, he's not. He said, well, I write scripts, you know, for pain. And she said, no, are you there when I can't see, when I can't speak, when I'm throwing my own fecal matter at my parents? Are you there then? He was mortified. And that kind of directness had doctors backing out of the room. I think sometimes we have to be that direct in order to get it to be heard. But the wonderful thing is that we really actually in this state now have the right to make some plans, and we also have the right to speak quite frankly to our doctors. And so we are these people in this room are in an amazing place compared to many people in the United States. And people in the United States are an amazing place compared to people in other countries. But this is an idea whose time has come. I'm looking at people who've been talking about it for 30 years. And I wish you strength, and I wish you love as you look at your life, what you define it as you embrace it and say, gosh, I'm mortal. Someday I'm not going to be here. And I purposely brought a picture because I also walked my dad home after Brittany died. And my dad was at a assisted living care about 3 miles from my house. This is how my dad broached life. I don't know if you can see, but his mouth is wide open. He's got his cowboy hat on, and he is yelling, "Yeehaw." And he said yeehaw a lot at music programs. He played drums. He and my husband played drums 48 hours before Dad passed. My dad came to me and he said, can you help me? And he didn't know about Brittany. We felt like he's 94 at the time that Brittany died, and he didn't need that information. And he was a memory patient, and so he said to me, I want you to help me. I need out of here. And I knew exactly what he was talking about. And I said, Dad, I can't help you. All I can do is hold your hand. I can hold your hand all the way. And he said, that's not good enough. And so when his doctor came, he had a conversation with his doctor. And I was not privy to it, which I think is kind of a wonderful thing. The doctor was still respecting my father's will. And my father did not drink or eat for 13 days. I would beg him, Daddy, just a little hit, some apple juice, cranberry. He would knock the glass out of my hand. No means no. I had to do it again. 2 times. The stuff, feeling I saw being pulled outside of me, shoved back in. And I had to turn to my father and say, I love you, Daddy. No means no. I get it. You know, this little cutie, he was really good for the 13 days. There was one assisted care girl. Oh my goodness, she was so cute, so young, so pretty. She would come and Dad would break the rules when she was there. She's the only one that could get him to drink a little bit and eat just a little mashed banana or something. And I always would stand in the doorway and smile and think, oh my goodness, Daddy, you've got an eye for the girls right up to the end. There's something beautiful about these stories, both of them. There's something beautiful about life and death and love. And I really, really encourage you to look inside and say, what do I want to do today? Do I want to spend half an hour sitting on the patio seeing if I can see how many birds I can see? Or do I want to sit at the window of my room and look for butterflies? Or do I want to listen to my favorite music? Do I want to take up the drum? Zig took up the drum in '94. And he played really well. I bought him a Celtic drum, a big round one. And, oh, you should have seen the management at assisted living care. Zig's taking up the drum. Oh, yes, my husband has one, and I do too. They're like, oh. We'd sit and play the drums, play the harmonica. We're never too old. Ziggy taught me that. So I really encourage you to look at your life, because in doing so, the answers about your death will come to you almost in the most natural of ways. And you'll know what your definition of life is, and you'll know what feels right for you. And I think doctors are doing the best they can with the training they've had, but that's got to change. We need to be training doctors on how to attend to the end of our lives. How not to run away from them. How not to back out of the room. How not to feel that they failed. Because, you know, they're in this to win it. And sometimes we have to let them know, look, you didn't lose the battle. You helped me find out what's wrong, and it's not fixable. And I'd like you to help me go now. There shouldn't be so much fear in the doctor about death, but there is. So it's our job, until that gets handled correctly, it's our job to look for doctors that will talk about death. It's our job when we are thrown into a doctor's practice or room or emergency room to force them to talk to us about, openly and honestly about what's going on with us. I'm not shy anymore. I went to my doctor, I asked, will you uphold the law? And she said, because she was really squeamish before it passed. I said, it's a law now, will you uphold it? And she paused and I said, you're not making me feel comfortable. Should I change practices? And she said, no, I will uphold it. She said, I will uphold it and I will be good. I just need to learn. And I felt like that was an honest answer. I felt like she was an honest woman. So I stuck with her. She better not pull me a fit. So I leave you with this, the definition of autonomy. Autonomy is a personal rule of the self that is free from both controlling interferences by others and from personal limitations that prevent a meaningful choice. So you need to be able to make a meaningful choice in order to be autonomous. And autonomous individuals act intentionally, with understanding, and without controlling influences. That is the definition of Brittany Maynard. That's how she lived her whole life. That's how she rolled. Before she knew she was sick and after she knew she was sick. That is how she rolled. So, she's here. I feel her energy in the room. Very invested in our futures. I'm not afraid anymore. If you read my book, you'll find that my daughter told me before she died, "Hey, Mom, if there is a life after death, meet me in Machu Picchu." Do you know where Machu Picchu is? Peru. It involves a little bit of climbing and walking and climbing and walking, climbing and walking, climbing and walking. Mosquitoes, rain. We went there, and she was there. Very, very there. So I'm not afraid anymore. It's not like I was taught when I was little. Something so much bigger than that. It's not like wings and angels and golden streets. It's more like love and light and energy. But I'm not afraid anymore. Thank you. Okay, yes, I would be happy to answer any questions. Yes?
Did Brittany have siblings, or do you have other children?
I have no other children. She was the apple of my eye. She was the center of my world. Any other questions? Yes?
So, what scientific evidence did she have that she was going to die?
Oh, she had an enormous brain tumor that had encroached across the median, which is, if you get a brain tumor, that's very bad news. When they tell you it's across the median, it means it's in both halves of your brain. It was in 3 of the 4 lobes of her brain. And the type of cancer it was is, well, the best way I can explain it to a lay person is it grows like a weed with roots that go down into the healthy tissue of the brain. Some doctors compare it to an octopus with the tentacles going into the brain. So you can move a little, you can try to remove some of the head of the octopus or the top of the weed, but if any of you garden, you know if you don't get the root, the weed's back. So that's what they did. They tried to take as much as they could, and what happened is something that does happen sometimes. They don't know why, but the cancer jumped grades and began to grow more quickly. So all these articles you read about it roared back, that's why they write that. It roared back because it did roar back. It grew 20% in 90 days. And the doctor had to leave the room. He said he was going to get some help and he couldn't find any, so he came back. And he said, I've never seen anything this bad. So she was having seizures. They were getting closer together. Sometimes she didn't know who we were. It took a while for her to remember. She didn't want to lose language, and she didn't want to lose the right to swallow. And because you need to be able to swallow in order to end your life. So she watched. It's kind of like it's kind of like a gating things. You're watching your symptoms. You're seeing how much quality of life you can eke out before you need to make that decision. Because once you let it go too long and you can't speak your mind anymore and you can't swallow, then the decision is sort of taken from you. Yes?
I understand that she was involved in this promotion of the California law. Can you address that?
In the very last weeks of her life, Brittany allowed a young lady to record her and film her talking about, at that time we had never heard, the only thing we had ever heard of was death with dignity. Because they're based in Oregon, and that's who we'd read their website and gotten the information from. The young lady who videotaped her was trying to get organizations interested in using the video to promote the right, because Brittany and I have felt it was really making things so much harder to have to move, to have to relocate, to leave your job and your neighbors and your dogs and your, to go to a strange place. And so she was very motivated in those last weeks to do what she could. It gave her purpose in life, and one of the nonprofit organizations picked up on the video and ran with it. And Brittany, because she looks straight into the camera and straight into people's hearts, her message reached millions of people all over the world on YouTube. If you haven't seen her on YouTube, you should watch her speak. She's eerily calm, and she's very convicted in her beliefs. And she was all the way. She wasn't always calm, I won't say that, but she was always convicted in her beliefs. She never wavered, not for a second.
So those tapes were shown to members of the General Assembly, right? That's a connection.
Yes. And it was also shown after she passed away, when we were working on getting the bill passed here. And I spoke with many of our senators and personally about my journey. My husband spoke. We walked from office to office in the Capitol, and people said some amazingly cruel things. But it's a journey. It's a turning. We're at a turning point, and sometimes that comes faster, and sometimes that comes slower for different people.
I'd like to just make a comment. We put this on the website, and so we record your voices, and that's only legal if you are aware of this. The usual thing is, if you don't want your voice recorded, don't speak. If you don't mind, speak up. Otherwise, I can't show this.
Did everyone hear that?
Yeah, that's Ken Watson, our videographer, 95
So
years
if you
old.
don't want your voice on the video, lie.
And you can watch it after anytime on our webpage.
Yes.
It's more of a personal question. So I followed Brittany's journey as soon as it was public on Facebook, and I work for a hospice. So as a mom, how did that feel, having one of the most intimate moments? The whole world was following it.
It made everything harder. It made everything more like electrified, and it obviously exposed us to cruelty that we wouldn't have to have endured if we had just kept our story quiet. But, and Brittany couldn't stay away from those things, don't read them, honey, don't read them. Then I'd go in my room and read them. You can't, it's like almost like driving by an accident or something. There's something inside of you. So we saw a lot of things that were really hard to digest. And it made the journey harder, but as I said, in those last weeks, she drew a great deal of energy and purpose from telling her story and from standing up and holding her head high and saying, nobody tells me how I'm going to die. Nobody tells me how long I have to suffer. And so we drew energy from it, and it sucked energy away from us, and I'm not sure how to do the math. I will say it was very difficult. I mean, we had people at our windows, and mail and packages, people calling us on the phone, people leaving all sorts of potions and lotions. Drink this and it'll cure your stage 4 brain tumor. And, you know, it's basically carrot juice. I don't know. And that's denial and hope. There's kind of a thin line between those two. Really thin. Yes.
If this is too personal, just let me know. But is this a shot that someone is given?
No, it was, in her case, it was...
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, how was the medicine administered? What was it? Was it a shot? And the answer is no. It was 100 capsules that had to be broken open. And then the inside of the capsule was collected and mixed with water and stirred until it went into solution. And then my daughter drank it in one. She had it mixed in a small amount, and she wanted to drink it in one fell swoop. She didn't want to take multiple sips. And she was very verbal about it tasting bad. Which I've heard many people say that their loved ones said, isn't there something they can do about the taste? I mean, and you want these last words to be super meaningful and really romantic and mysterious, but when I'm honest with people, you know, there's a woman in Canada whose brother said, for the love of God, work on getting this to taste better. Take this as your challenge, he said to his sister.
A little bit of sugar makes the medicine go down.
I knew, and my daughter took a little ice cream afterwards. She took a little bite of ice cream and said, okay, I got that out of my mouth, and that taste out of my mouth. And she was asleep within 5 minutes. She sank down into her pillows, and she made kind of a little snoring noise because those muscles are relaxing. And then she was asleep. And Brittany plans everything. She said, I read that your hearing is the last thing to go. So I don't want you talking about me. I don't want anyone here saying, oh, is she gone yet? I'm feeling a pulse. It's Freddie pulse. Oh, well, I see. She's still here. But she said, I don't want to hear any of that. So I want you to read poetry. So I was standing near her reading poetry, if you can imagine. For about 30 minutes, I read the most beautiful poetry, Mary Oliver's poetry, and that's the last thing my daughter heard was my voice reading poetry, and she did not hear anyone saying, is she gone, is she, that kind of thing. I have a friend who helped a person, I should reword that. No, I'm not going to reword it. She helped a person. She held their hand. She flew up to Sacramento, and she was with her friend here in California, using the law, and her friend, almost exact same, end of story. She said she fell asleep quickly, she made a snoring noise, and she was very, very sure that this is what she wanted to do. She was very happy, and she was very peaceful. And my friend who had called me and said, oh, I'm so torn, some people in my church said I shouldn't do this, and she said, I said, it's the most beautiful gift, the most personal thing you can do is to be with someone when they're passing. And I think it's such a compliment that she would want you. She's chosen you. And that means she thinks you will be calm and you will be loving. What an honor. And she flew that night, and she's not at all sorry. Not at all. You know, one thing that strikes me is that we talk about pregnancy now like, oh my goodness, you go to a party and people are like pulling out their videos and, hey, you want to see the baby crowning? And women talk about, oh, I had mine in the bathtub, and I had medicine, I didn't have medicine, I had a C-section, I had this many staples or stitches. I mean, it's open season about birth. That wasn't that way 50 years ago. We can do this. America, we are talking about birth. We are showing videos. Now we got to do it about death. And I believe we can do this. We can do it in a short period of time. Because my husband, I mean, look at him. He's just so sweet there in his little navy blue jacket. We were at a party and this girl was talking about, and they were massaging my friend, and then he got in the car and he was like, what is that? What were they massaging? I was like, you don't want to know.
You better raise your hand, Gary, since you're the star of this book. Not the star, but...
Oh, what is that, Gary? Yes.
Can you tell me, is there any difference between the California law now and the Oregon law?
They're modeled after each other, and I believe all the states' laws are very similar, except for one. Montana is their laws based on judicial. The judiciary has just had cases come before it that they've said we're not prosecuting. So in a way, that's how that Montanans have had. But you know what? We're in danger right now. It's in the news right now. D.C. voted for death of dignity, and now the Congress is trying to take that right away from them. And so we need people. We need you more than ever to talk about how we're a land of self-governing people, and we were founded on freedom of religion. So we can't have a Mormon from Utah or a Catholic from whatever state come and impose their beliefs on us. This country wasn't built on that. We were built on freedom, and I'm just so disappointed that they feel, they've only interfered in DC's affairs twice since the 1970s, and we're starting a new presidency right now with a million things to do, and they've decided they've got to get in there and meddle with the death of dignity in DC. I probably shouldn't be saying this. I'm sorry. Remove all my political ranting. Yes.
In order to conform to the California law, does there not have to be a doctor in attendance or nothing like that?
No doctor has to attend.
That's a personal choice supported by your doctor.
Right. And some people have doctors attend and other people don't. My opinion is like my daughter had a doctor there, but she was a pediatrician. And what she knew about what was going on, I don't know how much there was there. It just made Brittany feel better. Yes?
I love that you said that Brittany was so opinionated and so outspoken. I admire that in girls. I have 2 teenage girls. But I wanted to find out if she ever expressed the belief that maybe she was destined to shine light on this particular topic and she was willing to use her life to do that.
It's so interesting that you would ask that, because I asked her 2 questions. I said, first of all, you lived 29 years, but you lived and did things. You went to Nepal, you climbed mountains, you like scuba dived and snorkeled and jumped out of planes, and you held orphans and worked with them, and you worked with elephants that were injured, and you lived like more than 29 years. Was there something whispering in your ear, Brad? Live now. Do it now. And she was like, no, Mom, no. And I was like, well, do you think that this, you know, she was like, no, I don't think I got a brain tumor so I could be the leader. I really think I got a brain tumor because something scientifically went really wrong. And she just was very non-mystical about it. Just very, very down to earth. I think I wanted those mystical things. I wanted those, yes, I heard it in my ear. Yes, live, live. Worry your parents sick. Fly everywhere alone. It was just, like she said, cells that divided and divided and divided that weren't supposed to be there. She was so practical. Yes?
You know that there's a segment of doctors, I don't know how many there are, who cannot handle death. And I saw it when my wife died, our physician was not around for 3 days. And he explained himself, but I mentioned it to a friend of mine, a late friend of mine, who was dean at two fine university medical schools. He said, he says, when they come from medical school, they choose dermatology, orthopedics, they choose things where they won't encounter death.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, there's no way to not encounter death. And that's kind of the whole fallacy right there in the nutshell. It's that death is just an ordinary thing. And the sooner we can talk about it and share our thoughts about it, the better our living and dying will be. Believe me, I've told Gary, like I'm showing him pictures. See this thing? Don't ever let anyone put this in me. Don't ever. I don't want this. No. Yes.
I know I'm not alone in this, but I think that you and Brittany were instrumental, mainly in getting this law to be passed in California. And I think you should be congratulated for it.
Oh, just bigger than life, really. She just sparkled, and she just entered a room, and just the energy level went up. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me, and I hope I haven't hurt anyone's feelings or said anything inappropriate. It's a touchy subject.
Sure.
I have a few books here, and if you would like to read the story of loving Brittany and living with Brittany for 29 years, I would really love for you to read it. And we have a few books, and we also can take your order and send you a book, mail it to you if you would like it. And you can also buy it at Barnes & Noble. A lot of people are reaching out. A lot of people are telling me their stories. It's a heartbreaking subject. We've got to fix things.